Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. Today, wanted to go through and demo a spend analytics tool that we've been working on and have actually implemented with a client. It works a little bit different than most other sort of dashboard approaches to spend analytics. Like what I put on the webinar topic, it was all about, well, it's like Google, but for your spend analytics. And I'm just going to share a screen here, which I've got a couple of slides that I wanted to go through with you. So hopefully now, Alan, can you see the screen that I'm sharing? Just making sure that it's all working. So perfect. Also hearing from Neil that it's working. So great. So I've got a couple of slides and I wanted to show, walk you through effectively what we're going to go through today in this webinar. We'll jump through. So a little bit of a welcome, which we're going through that. I want to tell you a little bit about where we believe costs are hiding with an organization, and therefore like what's really the point of a spend analytics platform, because a lot of organizations have them. Even Gartner was saying that for business intelligence platforms that only 10% of people actually that have access to them use them. So you sort of need to look at, well, what's the point of doing this and investing time and investing money into such thing? And we've got a belief about where your costs are actually hiding. So we'll go through that. I'll give a bit of an overview to our spend analytics, and then I'll go through a bit of a demo. Then I'll open it up for questions and answers. I'll allow you to talk on this as well, so you can ask those ones, because I'm sure other people want to hear some of the questions you have, and then we'll close it out. So without further ado, I'll jump into the first one. So I wanted to tell you a short story, and the reason behind sort of doing spend analytics and sort of analytics is that there was an organization we did some work with many years ago, and essentially they'd outsourced this contract to some suppliers. And over a period of 11 years, the actual cost of this contract went from $3 a unit all the way up to $12 a unit. And they were buying a couple of million of these units every year. So that's, over 11 years, that's 300% increase. And or looking now, it's like 10.5% compound annual growth rate, which is, you could say that, costs are increasing. And even I heard this morning that the US now is up to, 9.5%, or 10%. Inflation, we're seeing other countries, have other inflation. And the reason behind this story was that the people sort of are managing this arrangement were just going, well, they made the assumption that these costs had increased just because of inflation. However, when they started to look into it and go, well, what's going to happen here? And if actually, I'll just jump through this as well. So they actually did go through the process and you re-tendered. So they market tested this contract and found that, okay, well, yes, the market was there, and so they were thinking that, yeah, like, well, maybe it is just the overall cost or the underlying cost, labor, materials, and all that sort of stuff had increased. But when it came to the end of this 11 years, and they went, well, let's look at this a little bit in a little bit of different way. And when they started looking into it and went, let's look at where the costs actually have gone. So the assumption was that the costs had actually increased, but when they actually drilled into it, they actually found that the costs had only increased by about half as much as they thought. The point for this story is that what actually had happened was their assumption that the costs have actually increased was actually masking something else that was actually happening in the organization. And throughout this contract, what was actually happening was that they had introduced a whole lot more complexity into this contract. So when they then had a look at it and went, okay, well, let's adjust this complexity and let's see if we can adjust it and see if there's any other cost savings. They actually found another 50% or a total of 75% cost savings, which worked out to be about $27 million per year for this organization. So That's a big jump. So the point of the story is that we believe that actually your biggest, most sustainable cost-saving opportunities are actually hiding within your untested assumptions. And you might be asking, well, why are we talking about assumptions when we talk about spend analytics? We believe that in order to actually test these assumptions, you need to actually do spend analytics. That's by far the best way of actually getting the information and testing it. And our experience over doing this for more than 1.5 decades now is that every time when there's been able to pull out really large cost savings, it's because we've gone through, or organizations have gone through and identified an assumption, validated that one, or tested it and found that that's actually not correct. And then that's where the biggest opportunity is actually gone. So if you think about it in this way, you think about it like organizations much like boats. So you assume that the boat continues, it's going forward, and that's the reason why it's going forward is the propeller. Not everyone can actually see under the water or look into the engine room, the CEO and everyone up the top going, oh, well, yeah, we're going forward. So it must be things that are happening and the propeller's, pushing us forward. But when they actually start looking into some of the detail, you might find the actual, the keel or the rudder is actually pointing in a different way. You don't have just one propeller there. You've got 2 or 3. They're actually going at different speeds. They're actually causing conflict and actually slowing it down. So while you might be going forward, maybe it's the actual the current that's actually taking you. So moving forward, the reason why we make assumptions is that our brains actually save energy by making assumptions, which actually helps us identify and diagnose problems. So I like this little cartoon. So take out chicken. I thought it was a place to pick up chicks, but no, this is not the way. So, and that leads us into, well, what happened previously? So if you remember years ago, I'm showing my age now, but they used to have to measure how much traffic was going down roads before cameras and all that sort of stuff. So you have people like this who are actually getting out there, actually measuring how much traffic's going past, and they'd take statistics. They'll be there with a counter, and then effectively they're making a sample size and trying to actually work out, what was actually happening on by taking a sample. So historically, it used to be really expensive to get data. But now, actually, we've got more data that we know what to do with. So this is an example of MRI. MRI has actually been around since the late 1970s and commercialized into early 1980s. But it was only a couple of years ago that, prostate cancer, they're actually using MRI to actually detect prostate cancer. They've had all the data there, but they just didn't know what to do with it. So while we're actually making fewer assumptions now, we still have to interpret the data. We have to clean it, organize it, and then analyze it. And that's the expensive thing to do at the moment. As a lot of people sort of on at the moment dealing with procurement, if you're looking at spend data, then cleaning all that is actually, that's where a huge amount of effort actually comes in. For the future is actually, well, getting immediate answers to questions. So we don't need assumptions anymore. So we had to make all these assumptions because it was expensive to get the data. We had to make assumptions because it was expensive to analyze the data. But now we've actually got the technology into the future. The technology exists. It's just not evenly distributed everywhere, that allows you to actually answer some of the questions and get immediate answers. So, things like Google, you can ask Google, this was just a copy of another product that someone's got. So they link it into Google and say, how's my portfolio doing? And it actually gives you an answer. So don't need to look at dashboards, don't need to do any of that stuff. You can actually get the answers. So we don't need assumptions. In the future, we don't need assumptions. The technology actually has got answers to questions that we haven't even thought of yet. And that's where we see things going. So a little bit about us. Our mission is to combine decades of consulting experience with the latest technology, and that's to find all the possible improvement opportunities in seconds. So not to go to the previous way of going, okay, we'll do diagnostic and then go through that. And then so that takes, then someone asks a question, okay, let me come back in a couple of weeks or a couple of days. and give you the answer. It's actually, well, ask a question now, get the answer in seconds. And we've found that technology is actually the way to do that. Something you probably didn't know about our organization is we do actually provide a bit of technology. We've got a couple of platforms. We've got called Tracy, which actually analyzes tender responses, specifically for the commercial part of tenders. Works really well for really large and complicated tenders. We've got the contract manager, and that's for managing large contracts that actually sit outside of. So you're getting a heap of data that's actually not brought into your ERP system. So managing some large outsourced services, or things like temp labor, where you're getting all information that's sitting outside your ERP system. And then, of course, spend analytics. So, and that's what we're going to go through today, being the spend analytics. We've already done this for a number of organizations. So Unity Water, we're actually doing work with spend analytics at the moment, but some of the universities and Instech Pivot, we've done work with actually managing some large outsourced services with them. And Newcrest, some other universities and some other mining companies we've actually done work with using the tender analysis tool. And that's been from tenders where it's been $500,000 to $1 million, all the way up to $500 million. So, so that's a little bit about what's happened there. And I'll talk a little bit now about spend analytics. So the reason why we've got this and the purpose it fits with inside an organization. This is a little teaser, and we'll get to the demonstration very soon. So the goal for procurement organizations is really to be, we believe it's to be indispensable to your organization. So actually knowing what you actually want to know actually what's happening, what's going on. Sorry about that. But in order to do that, you need to demonstrate that tangible improvements. So things have actually got to improve rather than just going, oh, we've identified savings that don't actually happen. And you need to demonstrate that you actually know what's going on. The worst thing that happen is, you find out from someone else that you're spending money, you've got a contract that no one's using, as an example. But the issue is that the data is rubbish, and it takes a significant amount of effort to identify these opportunities. And it can make you it makes you feel anxious and not in control, because you want to make sure that you've actually got the answers before someone else actually comes up with it. That's the worst thing that's happened is you find out from someone else that something's happening at your watch when you should know what's actually going on. But one of the biggest challenges, ERP systems, love them or hate them, SAP, Oracle, Tech One, Pronto, whatever it actually is, the way they actually classify that data, way they actually capture it and then classify that data, makes actually identifying spend and trends and all that sort of stuff difficult. The reason being is that it's designed for a financial purpose, typically, or if you get systems where you're running things like Ellipse and stuff like that, where it's an asset management tool that then's been sort of transformed into an ERP system. The main goal is to make sure that you manage, a large asset base. However, that doesn't really help with actually trying to identify spend, what's actually happening with your spend. So we believe you should just be able to ask some questions and get answers directly straight away, pretty much at the touch of a button. So what we've done is we've actually codified, decades of experience that we've had in procurement consulting and combined it with the latest technology. So this technology is available, but being used in other industries, other applications. We've gone, let's grab these things, because actually when you put it together and put a suite together and create a solution, it's actually going to give you something that's actually going to help. So how it works with our clients is typically they sign up, we sign NDA, a 12-month agreement. And then we work with them to get a data extraction. Typically, we make it as easy as possible to extract that data from their system. We then put it into our system, our tool, and they actually get spend insights. So your team can actually ask questions and get answers within seconds. Which then brings us to our demonstration. So I'll stop sharing this screen and I'll start sharing another screen. Okay. Bear with me 1 second while I just change this. Okay, hopefully this is coming up on your thing now. So the way we sort of implemented it, and one thing we wanted to change was that we found that providing a dashboard solution, which we've done for clients, is that some people use them, some people didn't. And the biggest issue they had was actually trying to get from, they had a question in their head, but then they need to work out, okay, now I need to log in, try and use this thing and try and then answer the question that that I've got. So we went, well, let's do this a little bit differently. Everyone's used to Google, and Google's great because literally you can type in anything and start actually getting answers to it. And it works really well in terms of actually asking, well, something like, who do we spend the most amount of money with? And it gives you an answer straight away. So we went, okay, well, let's implement something like that, which we've seen just here, which shows us, ask that question. And it's not always going to be the most perfect answer, but using a whole lot of experience is getting the most relevant answer to that, to the user as quickly as possible. So they might say, okay, well, who do we spend the most money with? But then you must want to go, well, actually, I want to see that last year. And the information will actually change, or then change it to, okay, last financial year. Or in the last, well, maybe not 65 months, but 6 months. And you can actually get results there. Or you could just say, show us the top 10 suppliers and actually get that information pretty quickly. So we thought this was, we've showed this with, we've got clients using this now, and we're actually seeing them actually start typing in some really interesting questions. And so I've already got a question from Alan. It's about what's the typical data that you need to load to get the magic happening. So what we do is, a big part of it is actually stitching the data together. So it's typically, and we'll go through this in a little bit later, but it's, the short answer is, purchase order data, contract data, invoice data. What else is there? Let's see, contract data. That's pretty much it. List of suppliers. But the way we usually work is for your specific ERP system, we'll actually look into it. And they typically all are based around a certain different way. So they'll have a table for suppliers, they'll have a table for contracts, and they'll have a table for a few different things, and they all link together. So they're all based on a database structure, which is fairly common. So we work with and find those specific raw tables, dump that all out, and then we actually stitch the stuff together. On some ERP systems, we've already know what those tables are. On other ones, it usually takes, might take a few days or a week or so to actually work that one out. But we work with the IT teams, or typically with the ERP vendor to actually get that information. It's then it's a process of classifying it and so forth. So this will actually, our tool as well actually classifies the data. So once we stitch the data together in the back end, we'll then actually go through and classify it. So you might ask, you might put in something like pipe. And on this, it's already saying, once you start typing in pipe, it's going, oh, we'll find a supplier, but also a category. So I can look at, okay, I want to see spend on pipes and pipe fittings. And we'll see at the moment, this is classified into UNSPSC data structure. So you can look at the spend with this or find that specific classification. And then you might go, it's saying it's all on contract here. The other thing what it does, this tool does as well, was we always found that just getting, I was really interested because lots of people interpret graphs differently. So you can show a graph to a couple of different people and they will actually get different answers or will tell you something different about what's actually happening. So that's why I put up the top here. We've got like 2 different lines up here where it actually gives you in English actually what's going on. So it's saying that, you know, $380,000 was spent on pipe within the last 24 months. 100% of that was spent with this company. This data is sanitized rubbish data. So we just made it up. So this isn't going to make actually much sense. 100% was spent on contract, and then Evans was the biggest supplier, representing 30%. And I think we should be able to click this one here. So we'll show now the biggest suppliers, and you can see Evans is the biggest there. So if you can click here and go back here. So you might actually want to just say the last 6 months. So we'll actually change it for that there. Or you might want to look at that spend by supplier over time. And every time you click on these different things here, it's actually adjusting the words up here. So then later on, if you want to look at it, you can actually type that in again later on. So if I'm going spend on pipe by supplier last 6 months, you'll get that same thing there. Or if I want to go again last FY, it will show the financial year that's just happened. Obviously, this data hasn't been loaded into the last couple of months there. So you can allows you to ask a whole lot of other questions there. It also, you know, looking up suppliers. If I want to look up, you know, you can start just typing in the name of supplier, and it's going to go through and actually look up. Well, it checks, you know, suppliers. It will check contracts. It will check categories, and give you hints to actually go, well, what should we actually look for here? If I go to total spend again, will give us this graph here, which you can shows you the what's what we call starburst graph, which shows you the breakdown of the categories by UNSPSC. So most of them in this services here, which you can drill down into, the government departments, here's off contract, building facilities, and go through different ones on here. And I should be able to click into that, and it'll show me the category I'm looking at here. So temporary personal services. So I can look at it by supplier again. Or I can look at the number of suppliers over time, which shows me, because we want to actually start looking at how many suppliers are actually changing over time. So you're seeing actually the number of suppliers are actually increasing here, which then we can run some other analytics on it and start giving alerts to it, rather than saying, well, you need to go check and interrogate the data to actually find what's happening. We can actually start doing some things in here. So you can actually ask questions about, you know, was there any, or has there been any PO splitting this year? And actually it'll give you some information on that. We haven't sanitized that data, so I can't show you that just now. We've got another question while we're going through it. We have literally millions. We've spent literally millions trying to get a spend queue happening and attempting to have an accurate view of the spend data. Why does it look so easy? I'm perplexed. Great question. Yeah, it is taking, I don't know, I have to really understand, Alan, what way you've been doing it. I guess our approach has always been doing things a little bit differently, and working backwards and sort of going, well, what way should we do this? So the way we do a lot of our classification is, we played around with a lot of machine learning. It's actually, we found, doesn't work very well for spend data. Typically, if you've got spend data, you have very short text lines. So you imagine your purchase order text, free text fields, plus also then you need to classify that across a whole heap of different categories. So UNSPSC, was it 40 or 50,000 categories? And in order to then classify that using machine learning or AI, you need to spend a whole lot of time manually or in some method to classify millions of rows of data to create something to train up, so then you can do it. So we went, that's probably not the most effective way of doing it. So we've done it a different way, where we try and actually do a lot of, we're using pattern matching, a lot of synonyms, and word matching, and a whole lot of different other techniques to actually get it. So it takes a lot of manual componentry out of the classification, so that you can literally run it through. We've also found as well, Alan, that quite often the way you classify things are actually quite industry specific. So if you're talking about water utilities, then an STP is you see that in the text. It's probably something to do with a sewage treatment plant. Or if you're working in telcos like TAM, then probably stuff to do with I can't think of a specific example there, but that's going to be very consistent across telco companies, the way that the terminology that they're using. Again, if you're looking for something in electricity, then again, there's going to be very specific. A transformer there might be something very different to a transformer if you're working in retail and you're purchasing toys. Transformer there is probably going to find some toys that transform. So that's a long way of answering that question. So a lot of work went into this to get it working like this, and it's really been built on a whole lot of technology that we'd built to solve lots of different problems over the 10, 15 years. So this is sort of the culmination of it together, where it just went, okay, we'll go through and actually do this stuff. So that's effectively the demo. I'll go through and give you a little bit more. There's a couple other questions, or a couple of slides we've got that answer some questions you probably have. But essentially, with the demonstration, with this tool, this is just the start of it. So as we go in and we're getting our clients using it, as they're putting in questions, we're recording those questions they're typing in, much like Google does when you type in something there. And so then we go, oh, that's really interesting. And then we can actually create a report or something for them that actually gives them the answers to it as well. So I'll stop sharing that and I'll share something. Go back to the slide deck now. All right, so that's coming up now. Okay. So under the hood, how does it work? So first step, what we do is data processing. So cleaning the data, categorizing it, and stitching the data, back together. So we found a lot of times we've got all this data there, but it just needs to be, you need to do something to structure it, so then you can actually answer some questions of it. And so we've done that in a way so that not only you can answer a lot of questions and structure in a way that answers the questions that typically procurement people or people interested in spend want to know, but also then allows for us to sort of then, by structuring in that way, you can answer those questions, and then also find other opportunities, which is the next bit. Then is actually scanning for opportunities. So we can then run processes in the background. So actually things like, purchase order splitting. Purchase order splittings, to do that analytically is a massive pain. Like we've done that, the manual process. So, the way our tool works now, is just an example, is that, finding, purchase orders from the same supplier, literally within, might be a 7-day period, and the value within about 10% of each other. To do that across, thousands or hundreds of thousands of purchase orders, to do that manually is quite complicated. However, we've now codified that, and this thing does it. So literally every day it can run a process and identify those ones. So you can literally type it there and shows you those, the purchase order that's been split, and even look at your approval level. So you might have a $10,000 or 50 or 100 or $250,000 approval level, that you can look at the purchase orders that are very close to those approval levels or just under them. So you can quickly identify those. So again, it can be asking that question of, has there been any purchase order splitting? And it'll give you that answer. But also then what we're moving towards now is identifying some of those trends that are happening that you're not seeing, and you don't even think to ask about it. You just assume that it's happening, where now it's actually alert you to it and go, actually, there's been some purchase order split, or there's been something else there. And the third bit is make the data searchable. So it allows for like natural language questions to be asked of it, so that you can actually get responses to it. I might now open that up to any other questions that people have, and let me know if you want to ask a question, not just type it in, because then I can give you access to talk. So who wants to put their hands up first? Who's got a question? All right. No questions by anyone? Alan. All right, Alan, I've given you access to actually talk, so fantastic. Shoot.
Well, I mean, I think I would like to shoot. Not necessarily you. Simon, okay, I'm a cynical old procurement pro, and we've been struggling with trying to get, concomitant with the new ERP system upgrade and all those sorts of things. We have spent, I mean, literally millions trying to get data sorted, and we still don't have data sorted as such, and certainly not to this level that you're demonstrating. So you mentioned that you go back into the source and look at tables, contract tables, invoice tables, and purchase order tables, I think it was.
Yep.
And then you pull that out and create these this magic. But I'm also thinking that there is an element here that means that if you seem to be pulling data from, say, invoice lines, purchase order lines, and contract lines, then it would seem that it would work really well with goods, where you've got items and item numbers and the like.
Yep.
How does it go with services, which is where the opportunities really lie?
So most of this data that, well, the implementation we've done with Unity Water, most of it's been services data. So the way we classify both goods and services, by classifying it against UNSPSC, is allowed us to get classified to a very detailed level. So it is, so for example, when people put in things like consultancy or something like that, our classification tool will actually run through that and go, oh, consultancy, yes, we know that that's actually professional services, so it classifies that information. So it works, works well on that way. We also do it in a way that there's some different levels of that sort of classification that actually happen. So you look at classifying if you've got a large amount of spend on contract, then you classify the contract. But then if you want to go into that next level of detail, you can classify that level of detail. But the same approach actually applies. So by cleaning the data, so people put in things like the supply of something. So there's all this extra guff in the text that you can actually get rid of and actually clean that data. So we've been working with cleaning data for literally years and years. So know some ways to actually get rid of that sort of stuff. And also, if you think about the way that the human mind classifies things, then it's a lot of it's around recognition of patterns. So we use a lot of pattern recognition to actually identify things and go, oh, actually, this is probably this. So we'll go through, immediate matches first. So once we take out all that guff, supply of electrical services, probably things like, it's an electrician or electrical services of some sort. So using UNSPSC as well, and using the hierarchy level, you can actually go to classify the data to an appropriate level rather than try and go down all the way to that bottom level, which then means that you can then later on, as you get more detail, classify that stuff to a more detailed level if you wanted to or could. But to be honest, I found a lot of organizations really struggle to even just get the basic classification happening at a high level. So most of the time it's just getting in there and cleaning things up, running the classification of it, and then getting some valid information. And then it's a bit of working with that supply or with that organization, seeing how they actually codify things in there, because they might have some interesting or typical ways. So if you think about especially if it's like project related, and I don't know, utilities companies, Alan, seem to run a lot of stuff on projects, where they'll have a project number, then they'll do something like dash, and then it might be project PMO services or something like that. And you go, oh my God, what is this? How do you ever classify that? So we go through all those things and actually go, well, actually, it's probably looking for this type of pattern, and it means this. So then we classify it that way.
Okay, thanks, mate. I'll contact you later because I think I need to explore this a little bit more.
Cool. No worries. And I've got Tam. I'll get you to ask that question to everyone because I know it's an interesting one. So Tam, I have given you access to talk, so you can unmute yourself now and ask that question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Tam.
Yeah, so my question is, when your client sends you the data, some of it may have already been classified in some form, right? Do you, as part of your data cleaning process, reclassify them according to your taxonomy, or do you reuse your clients' classifications?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something we've been sort of debating about what's the right approach to do this one. Where we're currently at and what we do now is we actually classify it all to UNSPSC, and then we match up UNSPSC to our client's classification. So that allows our clients later on, if they want to change their own taxonomy, they can do that, but the classification works because we found that UNSPSC is quite a detailed level of classification, and it's typically more detailed than most of our clients require. So then it's then sort of grouping some of those classification back up to something that actually makes sense for them. And we think that's a good thing that our clients have got their own taxonomy, because one of the issues you have with UNSPSC is that you put in something like car hire. like that doesn't exist in UNSPSC. It's actual vehicle rental. So if you have your class, so if someone's using what we showed before when typing in how much do we spend on car hire, and you go, well, you're not getting, at the moment, you don't get answers. We're also working on a solution there. We're actually using the same way we classify the data by finding synonyms. We can actually reverse that so that you can actually get, it'll actually show you, information about vehicle rental rather than, because it's saying that, okay, well, it works out, you probably want something to do with vehicle rental rather than car hire that's going to return nothing. But yeah, so we use the client's taxonomy as well.
Okay. Common problems that we found in our classifications of our spend data is that the business user may have classified the spend in one way, but when you actually look at the descriptions of the service or the goods, it could actually point to a different classification altogether. So when we do the spend analysis, we're not getting the right picture.
Yeah, we typically ignore what someone's classified it to as a first pass, because then we can actually identify, like if someone's classified it as, so a good example is like freight. They might go, okay, that's classified because it's when they've done the purchase order, they're buying something else and it's some sort of good, and they've, might be a whole lot of cable or something like that. Yes, we've got cable, but then we've got freight to it as well. And they just say that's cable as well, because they're just copying the same classification. But if actually it's freight should come in its own classification. So that's where you get that more granular level.
Okay, so in cases where you potentially has a few keywords in one descriptions, but actually the service is actually a services performed. It's just that, let's say, for example, I'm installing. This is a full turnkey service whereby I am installing antennas or batteries or rectifiers all in the same line, but when it is being classified as antenna spend, which is a hardware spend, how do you go about differentiating that?
So when it's different line items?
So I give you an example. So if we have a service description that says, okay, this is an installation service for antenna, rectifier, batteries, all in the same line. And when we initially classify that as a hardware purchase instead of a service, how do you then go about differentiating that, oh, this is actually, it should be reclassified as service and not a hardware purchase? Do you do that the logic processing or as part of the data cleansing or what? Because it's a common problem that we are facing.
Yeah, I guess it really depends on. So that, I guess the short answer to that is yes and no. It's that, depending on how the user puts the information in there. So if they're putting in all those different lines, all those different things, and it's a overall service, we'll flag, if they put services in there, obviously that you can flag and identify that it's probably like a service, even though it's you've got a whole lot of hardware in there. So the way we sort of tackle that at the moment is that while we do have the classification engine, we still then work, because we're loading in the data every so often for our clients, we still go through and just double check a whole lot of stuff. Also, when we classify it, we also classify it based and sort of identify a level of accuracy. So if something's in there and it's got like it's got a transformer, so it just says transformer in there, okay, that's a specific, that is a transformer, and that's going to be hardware, so you can have a pretty much 100% accuracy on that one. But then as you get to other ones where, as you said, it can be a whole lot of stuff, you go, oh, hang on, what do we do here? Then we say it'll classify and go, well, yes, we've identified it's most likely this, but the level of accuracy is, you can have a certain rating of it, and depending on what the level of spend is on that, you can determine whether it's something you look at manually and adjust it. But then also it sort of learns as well from there that once you've got and classified something like that, then when it goes through and classifies something, it comes up to that again, it'll actually go, okay, we've seen something similar to this before now, and actually go, okay, well, so the point is you only need to classify it to the one.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Great. Let's see if there were some other questions we had. Some other questions that we had along here. So how is it different to Power BI Tableau? I sort of alluded to this before. We think Tableau and Power BI, they're fantastic tools. However, that they're great at like visualizing the data if you've already got a clean data set. We found a lot of it's great that some of the questions that have come through have been that it's been a lot about cleaning up the data and doing something with it. So we built a highly configurable platform that allows us to go from anything from stitching the data together, cleaning the data, to actually visualizing it, and that whole end-to-end. And so it gives us some flexibility to do that. Harold's got a question, so I'll allow you to talk, Harold. You have to take yourself off mute now. Fantastic.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, Harold.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, interesting demo. Thank you very much for that. Right. Just want to ask you, how long does a typical program that you run last, and how many resources do you actually use to have this capability built in? Thanks.
Sorry, it just it broke up a little bit, but can you just repeat that question just again for me?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, just a quick question about how long does a typical project last, and how many resources do you usually use to have it get done? Yeah, thank you. That's all.
Cool. We found typically, for a project, it's an implementation. So we run this as it's an ongoing service, but there's obviously a setup time initially. So that setup time usually it's 1 to 2 months, depending on some of the complexities of it. For example, when we set up a client just recently, they actually they'd gone through, as everyone does. They had like the old system, and then it got an upgrade to the new system, and therefore purchase order numbers changed, contract numbers changed, and all that sort of stuff. So they wanted to match all those things together. So that took a little bit longer to do, but still it was only a couple of months. So we seem to be getting faster and faster at that. But yeah, for the basic functionality to get to something what you're seeing here now, yeah, it's only, we like to think it's in the matter of weeks rather than months.
Thank you.
Cool. Here's another previously asked questions, like how does it classify the data? So I talked previously about this, but yeah, smart search program on synonyms. We talked about sewage treatment plants. Yeah, patterns, when we can actually identify things. So for example, things like Jane Smith, May 2021, it's likely to be temporary labor of some sort. So rather than, it doesn't say anywhere that's temporary labor, but we know that just the way that those things are actually classified. And that's, again, we try and implement things of the way that the human brain actually matches some patterns and things. So we can actually identify that and go, oh, that's likely to be labor hire, so let's classify as that. Yeah, we found that significantly better than AI or machine learning and actually identifying these things. Because we found with some of even the AI and machine learning, even if you give the same information to those AI and machine learning, they'll it's sort of like because it's all based on statistics that 80 or 90% of the time you get the same answer back, but not always. So we want it to be a little bit more accurate than that. Which sort of then leads you to this question. So why don't we use AI machine learning? Because I know it's a big thing that everyone's asking. It's like, oh, use this. I said our experience has been, and I say we're not the absolute gurus of machine learning and AI, but by any stretch of the imagination. But we have found that when we've been going into it, that when classifying text, so it's great for pictures, but even not always great for pictures. Hence this image of the dogs versus the cupcakes. It sometimes always looks the same, but it can be a little bit different. So we found that because when a lot of classifying text, it's short text, and then trying to classify that across a huge amount of huge number of categories that it struggles with. You need a whole heap of data, plus also the data needs to be somewhat balanced. So you need exactly the same number of classification examples to load into it in order for it to actually be to work well. But also we do look at using components of it from time to time. So we're not saying that no, we're just excluding this completely, but we are we do find as we go through different components, we go, actually, yes, this type of machine learning or AI will actually be good for this type of component, and so we implement that. Another question had about data security. So the way that our approach for data security is, because we take a lot of that information, and it is in order for us to run to do all our analysis and also to do provide that interface that actually does things really quickly. We actually host that data. However, so data security has to be paramount. And our approach and philosophy of doing that is that we went, well, instead of going through and trying to work out what's the best way to actually make sure that security is there, we went the other way and said, okay, well, what are the most organizations that need the most securest amount of data? So, other federal government entities, we said, well, where are they storing their data and how are they doing it? And so we replicated that process. So it's all hosted in federal government data approved data centers. It's all compliant, and it's got encryption and also two-factor authentication login for users. So we try to make that we do make it as secure as it can be. Cool. I think that sort of brings us up to the last bit. So we've got five minutes left. So if there's any other questions, I might just open the floor to anything else that someone's got. I'll stop sharing this so you can see my face. Might want Alan, don't say anything about putting the other one back up. All right. Any other questions? All right. I'll take that as a no more questions then. Look, if you do have anything else you want to speak to me directly with, you can call me on phone number is 0433 847 909. Sam, put a +61 in front of that and lose the 0. So +61 433 847 909, or my email address is sthompson@acquireinsights.com.au. I think I can put in that information into the question and answer. Yeah, into the chat. Sorry, I'll do that. Sorry, I did see there was actually a couple of questions in the chat box here. So there's a question in the search box, customized or out of the box. So I hope I have answered that one, but yes, it does actually, we do actually customize it. Where possible, we customize it so it actually works across multiple instances. However, we can actually customize it specifically for your specific organization. We've already covered there. How long do we take? Fantastic. I think we've covered all there. So I'll put my email address into it to here. Insights.com.au. So any other questions, then feel free to just give me a bell or 909 or give me a call on the number. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. We've had lots of fun doing this and building it. So I hope that I'm just being told that maybe this hasn't come through in the chat. The host, everyone. Okay. I'm sorry. I need to put my email address and thing into the chat. All right. So hopefully you can see that now. That has come through. So fantastic. Thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. Got any questions, just give me a bell. Happy to demo some stuff with you. But yeah, this is, this can all be yours really. And we hope we can do some work with some of you in the near future. So thanks again, and I'll look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye.